Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure for me to introduce today Professor Jair Felix from Mexico. Professor Jair Felix is a National Geographic Learning Senior ELT academic consultant for Latin America. He holds a bachelor's degree in teaching English as a foreign language from Universidad Autónoma de Sinaloa in Mexico, and a postgraduate degree on teachers development from the College of St. Mark and St. John from Plymouth, England University. Besides, Jair holds a diploma in teaching English for specific purposes and an e-tutoring certificate from the British Council. Jair has been involved in language teaching and teacher training for over 25 years and has conducted workshops on topics such as lesson planning, discourse analysis for language teachers, action research, educational technologies, and 21st century skills, among others. He's a frequent presenter at ELT conferences throughout Latin America. So let's welcome Jair Felix and let's get started.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. As you heard before, my name is Jair Felix. I work for National Geographic Learning as the head of the Academic Services Department. And I'm thrilled with the opportunity of talking to you today about a topic that I'm really passionate about, which is how to improve and how to add dynamism to the practice of English language teaching and learning. We're going to be talking about the 7C's in English language teaching and learning. And I'm going to begin my session with a little video that I got from a TED Talk. In this video, an entrepreneur, a scientist named Jay Walker talks about the importance of English in the 21st century and the way in which English should be treated and presented as a true global language in our times. So as the basis for our further discussion today, let me first begin by playing this little video for you all.
Let's talk about manias. Let's start with Beatlemania. Hysterical teenagers, crying, screaming, pandemonium. Sportsmania, deafening crowds, all for one idea: get the ball in the net. Okay, religious mania. There's rapture, there's weeping, there's visions. Manias can be good, manias can be alarming, or manias can be deadly. The world has a new mania, a mania for learning English. Listen as Chinese students practice their English by screaming it.
Change my life. I don't want to let my parents down. I don't ever want to let my country down. Most importantly, I don't want to let myself down.
How many people are trying to learn English worldwide? 2 billion of them. In Latin America, in India, in Southeast Asia, and most of all in China. If you're a Chinese student, you start learning English in the 3rd grade by law. That's why this year, China will become the world's largest English-speaking country. Why English? In a single word, opportunity. Opportunity for a better life, a job, to be able to pay for school or put better food on the table. Imagine a student taking a giant test for 3 full days. Her score on this one test literally determines her future. She studies 12 hours a day for 3 years to prepare. 25% of her grade is based on English. It's called the Gaokao, and 80 million high school Chinese students have already taken this grueling test. The intensity to learn English is almost unimaginable unless you witness it.
Perfect. 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 I want to speak perfect English. I want to speak perfect English. I want to change my life.
So is English mania good or bad? Is English a tsunami washing away other languages? Not likely. English is the world's 2nd language. Your native language is your life, but with English, you can become part of a wider conversation, a global conversation about global problems, like climate change or poverty or hunger or disease. The world has other universal languages. Mathematics is the language of science. Music is the language of emotions. And now English is becoming the language of problem solving, not because America is pushing it, but because the world is pulling it. So English mania is a turning point. Like the harnessing of electricity in our cities or the fall of the Berlin Wall, English represents hope for a better future, a future where the world has a common language to solve its common problems. Thank you very much.
So I truly enjoyed this video the first time I watched it, and I came across it, and I think it is very true. The way in which it positions English as the true language for problem solving of our times, and then you realize, you start thinking about the major global problems that we have right now, and then you start thinking about the way in which people all over the world are dealing with such problems, or are getting together to discuss and find solutions for such problems. And then you realize it's all in English. English is a true problem-solving language in our world right now. And because of that, the way in which English is learned by students and the way in which English is taught by teachers should make a reference, and should also include that reality and position of English as a true global language in the 21st century, but also of English as the problem-solving language of our generation. And so it's not only the role that English plays nowadays in the 21st century, what should be present in English language lessons everywhere in the world, but it's also the new reality of students nowadays. I've asked a lot of teachers and a lot of students around Latin America, how would they define students in this new era, including students in the pandemic? how are students nowadays? And students have given me answers, and teachers have given me answers as well. And I've condensed those answers into these three realities. They've told me that right now, students in the 21st century are demanding for rapidness in the classroom. So they're saying that when student comes to class, the student expects for everything to be presented in a rapid, dynamic, quick way, because they don't have time to waste. They don't have time to invest on, very long and detailed explanations, and they don't like the idea of being put into the need for a deep analysis of language, but rather they want for everything to be presented as fast and in as a smooth way as possible, so they can start using and applying content right away. So I've always thought of this generation of students as the Fast and the Furious, like the movie. It's the Fast and the Furious generation. This is students nowadays, and if you're students, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a generation that has found ways for expressing ideas in 140 characters through Twitter. Or this is the generation that has found ways for expressing thoughts and ideas, presenting messages without having to use text. They do everything by images. And that's why apps like Instagram or Snapchat are so popular nowadays, because they're all about quick messages being presented to the audience through visual and not that much through text. So this generation demands for rapidness in education and in general, and English language learning in particular. Another phenomenon that it's a reality in 21st century education nowadays, and again, if you're a student, you should be aware of this, is that when students come to class, they bring in a lot of power. And why is that? Well, that old saying, remember that old saying that goes, he who has the knowledge holds the power. So whoever has knowledge has power as a consequence of that access to knowledge. And in the past, very few people had access to knowledge. We had teachers, we had scientists, we had priests, doctors, people with careers that had access to knowledge and were revered and considered as the most important members and most respectable members of communities, just because of the power they had, because of the access to content they had. But that has dramatically changed because of the advent of the internet and the possibility of people all over the world 24/7 for accessing content with just the click of a mouse or the tap on a screen, right? And that possibility of accessing knowledge, accessing content 24/7 has given students a lot of power. And they know that. And they know, and if you're a student, you should be proud of that you have the possibility of living in this time in which you are fully empowered because of the possibility of accessing content and knowledge. The big question is, how wisely are students using that power that knowledge gives in benefit of their own development? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But that is another characteristic of students in the 21st century. And the last one is perhaps the most obvious one, which is the reality of interconnectivity and how students nowadays are fully interconnected, for better or worse. And it's not only students, but we teachers as well. We are completely interconnected. We live by and for digital technologies. We are completely interconnected, from the food we eat to the clothes we wear to the music we listen to and the programs we watch on Netflix or TV. We're completely interconnected. And most of that interconnection is done originally in English. Maybe you got the translation, but it was originally planned and created in English. And so These three realities, rapidness, empowerment, and interconnectivity, are the three realities that are defining or should be defining education nowadays. The big question is, if you're a student of English, can you notice those things in your classrooms right now? If you're a teacher of English, are you using any of these realities in benefit of your students' acquisition of language? That is the key questions that we need to answer, and that is what we're gonna be discussing today. Because this is the reality of students nowadays. And again, if you're a student, you can correct me if I'm wrong. But we live by and through social media. We're fully interconnected, right? This is our world as we speak. And the reality is that for learning English in particular, maybe you might think as a student, you might think that you don't really need to take an English lesson in a more traditional or formal way. Perhaps you think, you know what? All I need is internet connectivity, and I can access Google Translator, or I can access Duolingo, or I can watch lessons online, or I can take a look at tutorials on YouTube, and I can use and learn English from that. And up to a point, you might be right. But the reality is that for truly learning a language, you need more than just the input that you have access to through digital tools. You also need to pay attention to 21st century learning requirements. What's needed in order to truly learn a language in the 21st century. And that includes not only the language itself, but it also includes a research on how people learn. So instructors, teachers of English should have a very clear view on different methods, different approaches, different pedagogical traits in order to teach English successfully and accommodate to the realities of students in the 21st century, right? Every class should also incorporate technological innovations. It is essential for English language learners and English language teachers to incorporate online platforms, apps, video practices, technological innovations at their best, because that's what the world is offering and demanding for in this 21st century. And more importantly, perhaps, not only the methods and the pedagogical traits, not only the technological innovations, but perhaps on top of everything is 21st century skills. The way in which students are going to be using the English that they're learning in the classroom. What do I mean by that? Well, to begin with, we have to establish differences between the traditional classroom setting and 21st century classrooms. And again, there's no difference if you're a teacher or if you're a student of English. You got to realize that right now, what really works when it comes to learning a language is your ability to discuss in that language. You don't need to take lectures like this one anymore, in which there's only one person talking and an audience just simply passively listening. But rather, in order to truly learn a language, you gotta engage in discussions. And the teacher, instead of being a lecturer, the teacher needs to become a facilitator. The teacher needs to facilitate the learning process rather than just give lectures to students. It's been demonstrated that even if you're teaching a very large class, when it comes to practicing the language and demanding production of language, teachers should find ways for making small groups within the class, because it's simpler and students feel much more confident when they have the possibility of interacting with peers in a more closed down, if you may, situation or environment. So the possibility of working in small groups, it's a demand of 21st century classrooms. Learning must be nowadays collaborative rather than independent. In the past, people were used to learning by themselves. Nowadays, because of the global village in which we live in, the best way to learn not only English, but whatever the subject, whatever the curricular area you might be learning or teaching, the best way to learn it by means of collaboration and multitasking activities. And if you're a teacher, you got to understand that instruction must be differentiated in order to cater for students' needs, and it has to be, as a consequence, student-centered. This is the reality of 21st century classrooms. If you're a teacher or if you're a student, I invite you to analyze your current conditions and then try to think if you are on this side of the chart, or maybe if you're still somehow stick to the past and using more traditional settings that are not reflecting the needs and realities of 21st century education right now. And don't take it from me. It's not only me who's saying this, but it's also very prestigious publications such as National Geographic or even the Time magazine that claim that there is a need to build students for the 21st century. There is a need to change the way in which we teach so that students can actually learn to use the language, in our case, in 21st century settings, right? The reality, according to Geoff Molken, the reality is that right now, thousands, possibly millions of students are really bored by schooling. School doesn't animate them anymore. You don't get students thinking, yay, I have to go to school tomorrow. I'm dying to take my English lesson tomorrow. Because maybe what's happening is that schooling system, that class, that lesson, it's taught more in a traditional setting rather than in a 21st century environment. So the reality is that nowadays, students want to do things. They want to get their hands dirty. They want education to be for real. And the reality is that right now, non-cognitive skills, the skills of creativity, motivation, or resilience are as important as cognitive skills or formal academic skills. And because of that, there are evidence of how well we're doing in English proficiency globally. Maybe one of the reasons why our countries in Latin America, even Colombia in particular, are not doing that great in English language proficiency, it's because students are really bored and teachers haven't crossed the bridge to 21st century education. Now, let's look at this ranking. It's from the English Proficiency Index. This is how well do countries rank according to the level of English of their population. And we go from very high to very low. And this was 100 countries that were researched. And you can find Colombia or Mexico very low in the low ranking. So out of 100, Mexico is 67, Colombia is 68. We're very low in the ranking. Our population, they're not learning English proficiently. Why is that? Well, maybe it is because we are still trying to learn English with methodologies, with approaches from the previous century. And we're not acknowledging the reality of English as a global language, as a problem-solving language, according to what we've discussed. So there's an urgency for our countries to move to, better levels in this ranking in order to secure a brighter future for their populations, right? So what is happening? What's needed? What can we do as students and as teachers in order to improve those results? Well, one possibility is maybe perhaps revolutionize learning. Pay a lot of attention to this video by Sir Ken Robinson, and then we can discuss further. But he talks about the need for creating a revolution in education, not only in English language learning and teaching, but in education in general, in order to accommodate to the new realities of 21st century education. Let's take a look.
Every education system in the world is being reformed at the moment, and it's not enough. Reform is no use anymore, because that's simply improving a broken model. What we need, and the word's been used many times during the course of the past few days, is not evolution, but a revolution in education. This has to be transformed into something else. One of the real challenges is to innovate fundamentally in education. Innovation is hard because it means doing something that people don't find very easy for the most part. It means challenging what we take for granted, things that we think are obvious. The great problem for reform or transformation is the tyranny of common sense. Things that people think, well, they can't be done any other way because that's the way it's done. I came across a great quote recently from Abraham Lincoln, who I thought you'd be pleased to have quoted at this point. He said this in December 1862 to the second annual meeting of Congress. I ought to explain that I have no idea what was happening at the time. We don't teach American history in Britain. We suppress it. This is our policy, so no doubt something fascinating was happening in December 1862, which the Americans among us will be aware of. But he said this: the dogmas of the quiet past are inadequate to the stormy present. The occasion is piled high with difficulty, and we must rise with the occasion. I love that. Not rise to it, rise with it. As our case is new, so we must think anew and act anew. We must disenthrall ourselves, and then we shall save our country. I love that word, disenthrall. You know what it means? That there are ideas that all of us are enthralled to, which we simply take for granted as the natural order of things, the way things are. And many of our ideas have been formed not to meet the circumstances of this century, but to cope with the circumstances of previous centuries. But our minds are still hypnotized by them. And we have to disenthrall ourselves of some of them. Now, doing this is easier said than done. It's very hard to know, by the way, what it is you take for granted. And the reason is that you take it for granted. So let me ask you something you may take for granted. How many of you here are over the age of 25? That's not what I think you take for granted. I'm sure you're familiar with that already, but are there any people here under the age of 25? Great. Now, those over 25, could you put your hands up if you're wearing a wristwatch? Now, that's a great deal of us, isn't it? Ask a room full of teenagers the same thing. Teenagers do not wear wristwatches. I don't mean they can't or they're not allowed to. They just often choose not to. And the reason is, you see, that we were brought up in a pre-digital culture, those of us over 25. And so for us, if you want to know the time, you have to wear something to tell it. Kids now live in a world which is digitized, and the time for them is everywhere. They see no reason to do this. And by the way, you don't need to do it either. It's just that you've always done it, and you carry on doing it. My daughter never wears a watch. My daughter Kate, who's 20, she doesn't see the point. As she says, like, it's a single function device. Like how lame is that? And I say, no, it tells the date as well. It's
And I'm gonna stop there in the interest of time, but I think that the message is quite compelling. Sir Ken Robinson in this video, it's talking about the need to revolutionize the way in which we approach learning and the way in which we teach our students if you're a teacher, right? We have to make sure that we're disenthralling from past methods, past approaches. And maybe you might think, well, but I learned very well by memorizing and drilling and repeating 15 years ago or 20 years ago. Why is it that I shouldn't be using that anymore? Well, the answer is quite simple. We live in a brand new world. We live in a rapidly changing world, a world in which globalization, the digital revolution, mass migration, climate instability, and now the pandemic are triggering new concerns and demanding a new kind of graduate. A graduate that it's not only knowledgeable, but that is also able and willing to create and innovate. And that's the key recipe of education in general, and English language teaching and learning as a global language in particular. As we learn English, as we teach English, we gotta make sure that we're also practicing skills for creating and innovating in benefit of our world, in benefit of ourselves and the world around us, right? We need to disenthrall, as Sir Ken Robinson mentioned in his very good video. And again, it's not only me saying it, it's not only Sir Ken Robinson saying, is people that actually run the economy of this planet stating it. At the World Economic Forum a few years ago, there was a research that asked the owners of companies very simple questions, including what skill will be most desired by employers in 2020? What are you looking for in the graduates that come to your company knocking on the door asking for a job? And this is what they said. They said, number one, I'm looking for abilities for coordinating with others. I need team players. But at the same time, I'm looking for the leaders of the pack. I need for my employees to have people management skills. Communication, collaboration are very important. I look for people with a high level of creativity, not only imagination, but also creativity, the possibility for creating solutions to different problems. I'm looking for critical thinkers, people that can actually read between the lines, people that can go to the bottom of things in order to find possible solutions to potential problems, and complex problem solvers. This is what I need. And when I first took a look at this, I thought, but where's English? How come English is not enlisted as a skill? And I made a little research, and I came across an idea that was very interesting. They're not talking about English or computing skills because they're already a given. They're taken for granted. That is, you gotta have English, you gotta have computing skills, and on top of that, you gotta have those 5 abilities that I'm listing in here. So there's an urgent need for students and teachers to start accommodating to this new reality. When you're learning English, when you're teaching English as a global language, you should also be including critical thinking, communication, collaboration, creativity, or even going further and expanding these abilities to get to what we call the 7C's, and hence the name of our session today. That is, when learning English or when teaching English, if you're a teacher, you gotta make sure that together with the language objectives that you have, together with the grammar, the vocabulary, the listening, the reading, the writing, the speaking, you're also including problem-solving examples. You're also showing students how to do research and analysis. You show them how to manage projects in English, because that is how they're going to develop critical thinking and doing abilities. Make sure your students are designing solutions, they're accessing storytelling, they're creating new knowledge, because that's how they're going to develop creativity in and out of the classroom. Make sure when you're learning English, when you are teaching English, make sure you're cooperating, you're compromising, you're reaching consensus and building community in a collaborative way. Because that, again, is what's going to get you or your students ready and prepared for facing the world in English in the 21st century. Make sure you present examples across diverse ethnic, knowledge, and organizational cultures, because that's how you're going to help students develop cross-cultural understanding. That's how that's how you students, if you're a student, that's how you're going to become familiar with the world and everything in it. A world that uses English as a global language of interaction. Of course, learning English is not only about memorizing terms, it's also about developing abilities for crafting and understanding messages, for using media effectively. Communication is essential. And if that communication includes effective use of electronic information and knowledge tools, then you're also developing abilities for computing or using digital technologies proficiently in English. At the end, you gotta make sure that you're developing aspects of or skills that include managing change, lifelong learning, and career redefinition. Because again, that is a skill that's needed in 21st century learning and teaching. Career and learning self-reliance. And this is gonna make you an innovator. And this is gonna make you a risk taker with high possibilities for success in using English in the 21st century. Learning English right now in the 21st century has little to do with memorizing grammar or repeating vocabulary over and over. Rather, it has to do with all of these practices that I've included here, including, again, critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, cross-cultural understanding, communication, computing, and career and learning self-reliance. Okay? At the end, if you aim to include those 7C's in your learning process, if you're including collaboration, communication, critical thinking, etc., you are developing this very, very clear path for assuming taking risks, for reflecting about the world, and for becoming resilient, for becoming powerful in terms of using the language successfully in global endeavors. And then you're actually making the practice of English made for everyone, you're making it meaningful, and you are making it as motivating as possible. Those are the benefits of incorporating those ideas of the 7C's into your daily practice. And just very quickly, when we talk about cross-cultural understanding, I think there's an urgent need for people to start paying attention to English as the true global language in our times. And it's not only me saying it, it's publications and organizations like the MIT Management School that are saying that close intercultural friendship and romantic relationships can boost creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Intercultural relationships promote creativity and innovation. So let's take the opportunity when learning or teaching English, let's take the opportunity to learn about the world. Because at the end, when you start analyzing English as a true global language, you start asking yourselves questions such as, what percentage of the world's users of English are non-native speakers? We know that there are over 2 billion people speaking in English right now in the planet. How many of those are non-native speakers of English? The answer is over 80%. Over 80% of the people that speak English in the planet are non-native speakers of English. That means that they've learned English as a second language or as a foreign language, but they have another mother tongue. They have another first language. So the reality is that globalization of the language has led to a diverse range of Englishes. And a true global user of English in the 21st century has developed this ability to culturally understand English implications in the world. The reality is that right now, the learning of English, language comprehension, requires not just formal decoding skills, but also wide-ranging background knowledge. Wide-ranging background knowledge because of this reality, because of this diverse range of Englishes that we now have in our planet. So if you're learning English, if you're teaching English, why not taking the opportunity to use English to access the world? Why not visiting the entire planet as you learn and practice English? And not just the US or the UK or Australia or Canada, the traditional English-speaking countries. But rather, let's use English to access the world, as English is a true global language that it's used all over the planet. And the reality is that through learning about a variety of cultures, students begin to grasp the range of cultural possibilities. They gain confidence in their ability to deal with and enjoy whatever new, surprising, cross-cultural situation they might find themselves in. And for that, we need to bring in culture into our practice of English. So how about teaching the diversity of English? Or how about learning the diversity of English? How about presenting or analyzing minority groups within the English-speaking world? Or exposing ourselves to accented English or different varieties of English, and not just American or British, but rather real English spoken by non-native speakers in the planet. And together with that, bring in cultural topics to your English language discussions. How about having a discussion on what people in your culture value? Or how do you raise your children? Or what is beautiful to you? Or what do you do to relax? And with all this in mind, you're going to have the possibility of truly enjoying the world and everything in it as you learn and practice English further. And I want to finish my session in order to have some time for questions and answers. I want to finish my session by presenting this idea. I think that to successfully communicate with the people in our world, we need to learn not only the mechanics of their language, but we also need to learn about their culture, their customs, their beliefs, their norms, their language, their similarities, and their differences with us. So I strongly believe that English language learning and teaching in the 21st century should include all of this in order to surely and truly empower students for success in 21st century endeavors. And with that, I can open up the mic for or take a look at the chat for any questions or any comments that you might possibly have. Let me then very quickly ask my moderator to
Yes.
see if there are any questions or any comments that you would like me to
Okay.
address.
I have a question, Jair, and it's well. Thank you very much for the interesting talk. It is very current topic, and I want you to tell us what do you recommend students to do to become independent English learners in the 21st century? Because there are many students here, and I think they want to know what can they do to work independently on their English learning.
I think the answer to that question is exposure. Um, if you really want to learn English, um, don't just expect for the teacher or the program to present everything there is to learn, but rather expose yourself to English in true, realistic environments. Have the opportunity to, there are very simple and enjoyable things that you can do. Expose yourself to um, English through reading English, listen to lectures and speeches and movies and sitcoms in English. Expose yourself, navigate the internet in English, do research in English. But the key word is exposure. If you expect for everything to be presented to you from the page of a textbook or from a single class, you would be missing the great opportunity of interconnectivity that this time is providing to us. So, if you want to take responsibility of your own learning process, expose yourself to English by accessing audios in English, videos in English, navigate the internet in English, read books in English, and that would help you become very proficient in the language.
Thank you. We have a question from Laura Ganem. A very interesting question about the role of universities in order to create much more diverse programs and to motivate students to learn new languages.
I think the role not only of universities but of all educational institutions in the world is, again, get this idea of 21st century education in which content is essential, but it's not the only thing that's needed. You also need to know how students are learning and what students require nowadays in order to accommodate to their needs. And perhaps the best thing that universities in particular and all academic institutions in general, the best thing they can do is to aim for content-based instruction by bringing the world into the classroom. Use a little bit less of theory and much more of real world practice in the teaching and learning process. I think that is what I could say about the role of universities. Universities right now should prepare students for the real needs of the world, and we saw that in my presentation. We saw how organizations are now demanding for people that have abilities for communicating, for being creative, for being critical thinkers, for being good collaborators. Those are the skills that gotta be present in all university programs nowadays.
Yes. It caught my attention that phrase that you used in your presentation that says that students want to get their hands dirty. So they want to do things, they want to create. Uh-huh.
And what's really interesting is that that is called experiential learning. You learn by doing, you learn by experience. And what's really interesting is that lower levels of education, particularly preschool and primary, they use that a lot. And children do get their hands dirty when they're younger and they learn by doing. But as we move up the educational ladder, we become more and more theoretical and less practical. And in that process, students start to get bored. And by the time they get to college, they don't seem to have any sort of real passion about learning. So maybe it is about time to start incorporating experiential learning at college levels for benefit of our students.
You're absolutely right. Okay. So that's a call for professors also, for teachers of English, no?
That is correct, yes.
Yes. All right. Well, we have no more comments in the chat. I don't know if there is another question. You can do it in this moment. We still have 5 minutes to finish with the activity. Okay, so Jair, thank you very much again for your interesting talk. We hope to have you again at the UPV soon.
It'll be my pleasure.
Thank you very much. There is a student asking, how many languages do you speak?
Not that many. I speak Spanish, of course, that's my native language. I speak English. I speak a bit of Portuguese and Italian because I took them as courses in college, but that's about it in reality. I'm not multilingual, but I've advocated to the research of English language teaching and learning for most of my life.
And for those students who are wondering if that's very difficult, what can you say about learning different languages? Is it something, because sometimes they don't see it like a possible thing to do? And
the thing is that what I believe is that if you've learned the language as a foreign language, like for example, I learned English as a foreign language, the process has been fully established. And you have demonstrated, or your brain has demonstrated, that you have the ability to learn not only one, but as many foreign languages as you need it. So it's just a matter of time, right? And I guess I haven't learned more languages because I haven't had the time to study them, but I'm sure I could, because since I learned English as a foreign language, I now have the ability to learn whatever the language that I decided to learn, because the mental process has been established already. So if you're studying English and you are doing it with a degree of success, then you're equipping your brain to learn as many languages as you wished.
So it's a matter of time and discipline, no, Jair? Discipline
Absolutely.
is also very important.
And engagement as well. It's
Yes.
time, discipline, and engagement. Right.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think everybody is very happy. There are very good comments in the chat, Jair. Thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and your experience with us. And well, let's finish here. Thank you very much for being with us in the International Week, to Jair and to all the students and the audience today. Okay.
It is my pleasure. Thank you very much, and hope to hear from you very soon.
Thanks. Okay.
Bye-bye. Stay safe.
Bye-bye, Jair.
El mundo puede detenerse. Tus sueños no. Elige bien. Elige UPB.